Hey, what's up, Spartan Nation? Welcome to another episode of the Spartan Nation Podcast. Here with your host, Matt Lonsberry, and my co-host, Aiden McCrone. Aiden, it's been about a month since we've done this, and so I don't
Yeah.
know, our audience might just be gone. We'll see if anybody tunes in tonight after a very long hiatus. Some of that due to obviously the holidays, and then also with me starting to coach basketball a little bit, that's taken up some more time, and so. A lot of different factors, but we're going to try to catch up as much as we can with tonight's show, hit on a lot of different topics. But there's one thing I wanted to start with, and I was going to do this a long time ago. But again, we haven't had a podcast in a month. But since our last podcast, Aiden actually graduated from Michigan State. So just a round of applause.
Yeah.
Round of applause for Aiden for
Thank you.
graduating
Yeah.
from
Thank
Michigan
you.
State.
Thank you.
What are your future plans? They didn't know. We don't get into all that, but just wanted to throw him a little shout out there for getting his degree. And with that, we'll dive right in here. So, Aiden, I wanted to let's recap a little bit of what's happened over the last month, and then we'll kind of dive into some more specifics. Last time we talked, Michigan State men's basketball was in not a great place. I think they were 4-5. Had just come off, I think, back-to-back losses to open Big Ten play. Since then, 6-2. That stretch started with a win over Baylor, which was a big win over in Detroit. Kind of got some of the positive mojo back. Michigan State reels off 5 consecutive wins, and then another roadblock when another couple back-to-back losses in the Big Ten to Northwestern and Illinois, and then they get back on track against Rutgers. So I guess before we get into like your thoughts on that, let's kind of continue here with some of this other stuff that's happened on the football side of things. We haven't talked since National Signing Day, which feels like forever ago. A lot of transfer portal additions and losses over the last month. We'll dig into those a little bit tonight. So that's kind of a very brief recap of what has gone on. And with that, we'll dig into some more specifics. We're going to start with basketball tonight. So I guess, Aiden, take me through that 5-game winning streak that Michigan State had. I don't know about you, but I was feeling like, okay, this is the team that we expected to see in the preseason. And then Big Ten play starts again, and they suffer a couple losses, and that was kind of a letdown. So talk me through that from your perspective a little bit.
Yeah, you see the game in Detroit where they played Baylor and they looked confident and strong and just the team that we expected. And then they go and beat a kind of a difficult Indiana State team. And then kind of they beat Oakland always kind of battles them. And then there was another win against Stony Brook, and I think I'm missing another team somewhere in there. And then Northwestern, they go to Northwestern to, resume Big Ten play, and they kind of struggle there. And Boo Booey's been there for a while, and he's beat MSU pretty much, the last, I think, 3 outings. But It feels like every year. And then, I wrote an article before the Illinois game kind of talking about, they've had a tough schedule and they can still make the tournament. I know they're, a lot of like projections right now, just because of their record, they won't make the tournament. But, as this season goes along, they're going to start playing some, lesser teams that they can get, these wins. They went and played Penn State and kind of beat them up. They go and beat Rutgers yesterday, which was good for them. But they're going to run into, some of these teams like, Illinois, which I thought they played, decent. They struggled a lot at times, and it seemed like, kind of here and there, it's like, okay, they missed fears, and, Malik Hall wasn't really kind of on his game. So there's things like that that have really hurt them. And I don't think it's anything new that we haven't seen within the last, even 2 to 3 years from Michigan State. But I do think the schedule, while there still is Purdue on the schedule, while they still have to go to Wisconsin, they play some more difficult teams. I still think there are enough wins on this schedule, but they do need to capitalize and get a big win sometime soon. Whether that be, playing Illinois again, you know, playing at Mackey has always
Tough
been
place.
State's Achilles heel, but a win there would, be huge.
Sure.
At Wisconsin again, like they have to capitalize on, at least one or two of those opportunities. They can't be, a 16 and 15 team, on the bubble during Selection Sunday without one of those kind of big wins.
Yeah, for sure. And as always, audience, if you have questions, go ahead and drop those in the comment section. We'll answer as many of those as we can as we go through tonight. I'm glad you brought up the remainder of the schedule, because that's kind of where I wanted to start with this segment too. Is according to one of the advanced analytic metrics, I think it might be KenPom, I'm not sure, but I think Michigan State is favored in 12 of their final 14 games, according to these advanced metrics. So that does set up for a potential chance for Michigan State to kind of get on a run here, get some positive momentum going into March. Obviously, you got to start with Minnesota on Thursday. I think that's it's at home. So again, that's a game you have to win. And then you go to Maryland, another tough place to play, but that's a game that can be won for sure. And then a tough one at Wisconsin. So, but as you mentioned, like an opportunity to kind of get on and run a little bit here and go into February. It's interesting that it seems like February has historically been like a tough month for Izzo, where Michigan State typically starts a little better than they have this season, and then maybe dips a little bit in February, and then it comes back up for March. They can't afford that this year. They gotta start stacking those wins now and get some momentum going. But there is an opportunity for that. You got Minnesota, Maryland, Michigan's a team that should be able to beat twice. I know they won today, but they're not a good team. Penn State, who you beat by 30 at home, you go over there. Road game in the Big Ten, never easy, but Penn State's a team you should be able to handle. So yeah, the schedule does set up for that run to occur now. It was tough. I think it was, we looked at the non-conference schedule and we knew it was going to be difficult with teams like Duke and Arizona, Baylor. But I think it was even tougher than we realized maybe coming into the season. We had no idea James Madison would be as good as they are. Butler's, kind of a middle of the road for whatever league, the Big East or what league they're in now. But it's been tougher than maybe we anticipated. But now, like, you got to start stacking these wins, as you mentioned. Let's kind of get into some more specific things about players. I did want to talk about Jeremy Fears a little bit, just because, again, we haven't had a podcast in a month, and so we haven't had a chance to react to that news. It's old by now, so we won't spend a ton of time here. But obviously, really disappointing for Jeremy. He was off to a pretty strong start to his Spartan career, I would say. He was, of the freshmen, he was the most consistent guy as far as minutes. Already a very good defender as a freshman, and was orchestrating the offense pretty well for Michigan State as well. And then he goes home for Christmas break. Obviously, we know what happened with the shooting. And likely done for the season. I think that's safe to say at this point. It would be a surprise, I think, to most if he were able to return at all this year. And that's obviously not the number one concern with him anyway. It's for him to fully recover and all that. So I know, obviously, like everybody, I was shocked when the news broke. Give me your reaction to that, and maybe your thoughts on Jeremy's play this season before obviously this happened.
Yeah, I mean, for a freshman coming into kind of a Tom Izzo system, that it's hard to get in the rotation if you're a freshman. So I think what he did was good. I think he's done well on both sides of the ball. I think they didn't really need him to score that much. They need him to do a lot of the other stuff, just the passing, the defense. But yeah, and then the floor spacing. So I think he did a good job for that. And then just wishing him a healthy recovery from what happened. And then kind of seeing from here who's going to step up. And we've kind of seen what that rotation kind of looks like without him.
Sure.
With, Holloman getting more minutes and kind of Akins having a little bit of a different role, which I think has been helpful for him to get the ball more a little bit. But yeah, I think, this is a completely different MSU team without him. For better or worse, it is what it is, because you can't really change what happened. So,
sure.
And he's not going to get better anytime soon. So just if he can, just a healthy recovery, he'll be back next season.
Yeah, and I know obviously he's not traveling with the team for road games right now, but he does look to be like in good spirits, which is great to see after what happened. And yeah, definitely looking forward to seeing him continue his career down the road. I'm glad you mentioned Trey Holloman, because he's another guy that I really wanted to talk about tonight. Dude's just playing really, really good basketball right now. I think I don't think it's close. He's made the biggest leap from last year to this year, as far as like, if you look at the roster, it's night and day. And he was a good defender as a freshman last year, a lot like Fears, but like the leap he's made offensively this season has been really impressive. In terms of his shooting, he's one of Michigan State's better 3-point shooters as far as percentages this year. I think I saw something on Twitter today about he leads the country in an assist to turnover ratio right now, which I know he's not a starter, so his minutes are reduced a little bit. But again, he's just playing really clean basketball. Really liked what I've seen out of him. Your thoughts on Trey Holloman and his growth from last year to this year?
Yeah, again, same thing. They don't really need him to score per se, but he does a lot of the other stuff really well. I think, like you mentioned, defensively, I think, he's, their biggest asset in the front court right there for on defense. He can guard the opposing team's best player if they need him to. Obviously AJ, Tyson, Akins are all good defenders as well. So that just, helps with that. And like the floor spacing, making that extra pass, he's found, Walker and Akins open a lot. And, he's done a really, good job. And, AJ gets a lot of credit for kind of, leading the team in assists and, kind of going for some, season records and maybe some MSU records. But Trey Holloman's right there with him in terms of passing and just kind of the vision he has on the court, which is really helpful for them. Gives them a lot of depth and a lot to work with, even after losing Fears.
Yeah, for sure. Tyson's been so consistent this season, and he's been the leading scorer in most of the games. He's just been rock solid this year. I know he struggled a little bit with the shooting early on. Wasn't connecting at the rate that we maybe anticipated. I know he had some stuff with like the hip and ankle, but he seems to be pretty healthy at this point and is playing really good basketball. Didn't shoot the ball great against Rutgers, but nobody really did against Rutgers. Two of the better defenses in the Big Ten there, and so it was going to be tough to get buckets there. But Michigan State did shoot well from outside, which that's been another kind of development over this last month. As last time we talked, Michigan State was really struggling shooting the basketball, and that's Waters kind of found its level a little bit there. They're starting to see some shots go. Akins is another one who's shooting the ball better lately, and so again, Walker really solid. I saw he's on the Wooden Award watch list, top 25, and I think he's very deserving of that. Leading this team in scoring. I don't know if he's still averaging 20 per game, but he was right around that going into Rutgers, I believe. So really solid there. AJ's AJ, so he's up and down. But I do think his play has gotten better over the last month as well, a little bit more consistent. So again, this backcourt that we were kind of drooling over in the preseason, it's starting to kind of live up to those expectations a little bit with Holloman coming off the bench. Obviously, Fears being out hurts that a little bit, but it's kind of forced these other guys to take on, as you mentioned, a larger role, a bigger role, more minutes, and they've responded well, I thought, since Fears went down. Another guy I wanted to talk about was Malik Hall, just because You talk about inconsistency, and that's a lot of what Malik's career has been. Is he'll have a very he'll jump out at you in one game, and you're like, man, where's this guy been? And then he disappears for the next couple. I think he's been a little bit more consistent this season. I know he had the no-show game against Northwestern where he played 26 minutes and like didn't have a positive stat in the box score, which was bizarre. But if you look at the 4 games that kind of sandwich that one game, he's played really well over these last during those 4 games. I think averaging over 17 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, maybe somewhere around there. So he has played better of late. I love his turnaround jumper in the post. I cringe every time he takes a 3-point shot, but he's had a few more of those go down lately. I know he got off to a real rough start out there, but I do like what he's brought in the post for Michigan State. So talk about Malik Hall a little bit. What have you seen from him during this recent stretch?
Yeah, I mean, he really struggled against Northwestern, and that was apparent to anyone who watched the game. But kind of what you see out of him is kind of what you see out of Izzo. Izzo, he went on that whole rant after the Northwestern game about analytics and everything, and I think that could be credited to Malik Hall's performance, and I think Izzo still believes in him. He still trusts him because against, I think it was Illinois, he went out and played 36 minutes. Like Cohen Carr did not play a ton. The Rutgers game, he got a little bit more because they had a steady lead. But when it comes down to it, Izzo wants to have him on the court in crunch time. And I think that's valuable. And I think, he values, the fact that he's a captain, the fact that he has more experience than anyone else on this team. But yeah, like you said, he can't have those games like Northwestern where he's just a complete no-show, and we've seen that over the last 4 seasons since he came to MSU, because he did come in and he was a backup, but he still got probably more minutes than what Cohen Carr is getting right now when he was a freshman. So I think, the biggest thing for him, again, is consistency, and I think it always will be. But Izzo trusts him to stay on the floor at all times. But, it's really what is he going to do? And I think if he's not scoring, he's got to be rebounding. They really need that. And I think they've gotten better and they've really emphasized that. Yep. But, it's got to be rebounding because, like we talked about, Hogard and Holloman can take care of the spacing and the passing, and Tyson and Akins can take care of the scoring, and they really need those extra guys to help Sissoko and Cooper out with the rebounding.
Yeah, I think Michigan State has out rebounded almost every opponent, if not every opponent, since that Baylor game over these last 8 or 9. So that's an encouraging sign, because that was those first 9 games. It was apparent that Michigan State was getting hammered at times on the glass, and also over these last 3 have not allowed an opponent double-digit offensive rebounds in any of these last 3 games too. Now, granted, they lost 2 of those, but again, that's one of those key stats where they got to shut down those second chance points. They've done a better job of that of late. Speaking of Cohen, I'm with the majority, I feel like, of the Michigan State fan base here when I say I wish he was getting more minutes. When he comes in, he just seems to make an impact. I know he still is learning defensively about where to be and rotations and things like that, but it seems to be a spark plug anytime he comes on the floor. The way he, especially at home, the way he can impact the crowd, not only with the high flying dunks, but also we've seen some of his block shots that comes out of nowhere and swats a shot, and even getting in some passing lanes as well too. So just a super athlete. I do think I have the sense that, like, as we kind of get into wind down January, get into February, it does seem like maybe those minutes will start to go up for him. Maybe he can get up to 11, 12, 13 minutes per game as opposed to the 7 or 8 that he's at right now. And I think that would be a very positive development for Michigan State, because you got to get your best athletes on the floor. and he's the kind of guy who can make an impact when it comes tournament time if he starts to ascend at this point. So looking forward to seeing more from Cohen going forward. Turning our attention to the post players. Obviously, Jackson Kohler is now starting to make his way back into the rotation, playing very limited minutes right now, but good to see him back out there. I think we know what Michigan State has in Carson Cooper and Mady Sissoko at this point. Just pretty well established what they're going to get out of those guys. I will say I think Mady has played better in terms of rebounding the ball. We've talked about that. He's been part of that. Carson has I think he's probably the best defensive center of the three, most consistent defensive center, I should say. And then, Xavier Booker still a work in progress. So give me your thoughts on like the post players and what you've seen from those guys.
Yeah, I think Kohler brings back some, offensive energy that they need. I think, defensively, that's definitely a point of improvement that he needs to work on. I think, like you said, Cooper is probably the best post defender, but Kohler's probably I would say would be the worst.
Sure.
So figuring that out, kind of the trade-off there, I think, Booker, it's still kind of an ongoing thing, and it's kind of vague, honestly. There's not a lot of detail of what he needs to work on. It's a lot of kind of just practice and building better habits is what it sounds like. Kind of, again, that consistency, kind of being more consistent in his everyday, during practice, before, prepping for games. So there's that. Cooper, I think, he's worked his way, and, he's a good rotation player. He's kind of established himself as that. And for Mady, I think Mady has really kind of stepped up in a way. Just the fact that he's starting to make foul shots, I think that's a big thing.
Yep.
Is that he's making foul shots more than any other front court player for MSU right now, and that's keeping him on the floor at the end of games. It's, helping with that. I think I think he still has trouble getting into foul trouble. I think that's the thing is, he can stay on the floor when he's not in foul trouble, but that's definitely something to work on. So I think the fact that they now have, 4 guys, but it kind of with the Booker situation, it feels a little bit more like 3 guys. So the fact that they got 3 guys at that center position it's good. And they're 3 kind of completely different players. And so you can do a lot with that because you also have a really good mix of guards. So that really helps, make different styles and make, cater to the different matchups that they face.
For sure. Mady's limited a little bit by his hands and his feet. I feel like he has.
The coordination is
not always there, but he does have a high motor, and I feel like his motor has stayed very high over this last month, and that's been reflected in his rebounding numbers and things like that. So, and Kohler is interesting because we talked about this before, but it's really unfortunate that he had the foot injury going into the season, because we know that he slimmed down a lot. It looked like he had himself in really good shape. And it just takes time for, especially when you're talking about playing at a Big Ten level, it takes time for a guy to get back into game shape and to be able to contribute at that level. Hopefully he gets there by March. We'll see. I'm sure they have a plan for him going forward. But as Keys to Wisdom said in the comment section, like he's probably he's the most polished of Michigan State's post players as far as offense. I know Xavier can shoot the ball really well from outside, but as far as we haven't seen Xavier post up and make a move down there. I can't recall one anyway. So we know that Jackson brings that to the table if he can get the wind back and get back in shape. And so that'll be interesting to see how that shapes up over the next month. Any other thoughts on basketball, Aiden? We're about 25 minutes in. I don't want to go super long tonight. For one thing, we got to get out of here in time to watch the Eagles and Buccaneers to find out who the Lions are going to play in their second playoff game on Sunday. So we got to get out of here before too long, but we got some time. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts on basketball?
I guess my one question to you would be, was the Steven Izzo and one the loudest you've ever heard Breslin?
Man,
because that might have been, the highlight of the team season so far. And I beat Baylor and kind of went on that huge stretch.
I'm glad you brought that up a little bit, because on the one hand, obviously it's a really fun moment for Tom and for Steven and the team. Obviously went nuts, and the fan base. Fan base has been waiting for that moment for the past 4, maybe 5 years. So really, really cool. Really cool to see. Part of me wonders, like, can that in a really strange way, in a nearly 20-point win, can like that moment be something that really galvanizes this team and prepares them for the stretch run here, or is that just a Hollywood script that I'm coming up with in my head? I don't know. But
yeah, I mean, why not?
Yeah, seeing the way that they reacted though was really cool. It was definitely Breslin was rocking. Thinking back over the last couple of years as I've covered the team, I don't know, like didn't Tyson hit a 3 to beat Purdue recently? That was probably up there too, as far as because that game obviously was like a sold out game, and Tyson hits the 3 to win the game, so that one probably rivals that. But just the fact that a game that was an 18-point game or 16-point game had a moment that almost, as far as the decibel level, matches that was pretty impressive. So no, interested to see what the team looks like on Thursday when they host Minnesota, for sure. With that, I wanted to give a shout out to Eggplant in the comment section. Good to have you back. Good to be back after a long hiatus here. So we're going to try to be more consistent going forward. The goal would be to have at least one podcast per week. I think that's probably what we'd like to go with moving forward. Obviously, had to get through the holidays and then some other stuff. So, but back to the business at hand. Let's transition to football a little bit here to close out the show. Aiden, obviously a lot has happened over the last month. Signing day, transfers in and out. But I want to start with the quarterbacks, because I think we had a show after Aiden Childs committed to Michigan State, and he is the presumed starter for 2024. But since then, Michigan State added a couple of high school prospects to their 2024 recruiting class. And then Tommy Schuster, transfer from North Dakota out of the FCS, who's played a lot of football over the last 4 years. So give me your thoughts on the let me share my thoughts on Tommy Schuster first. I thought that was the perfect fit for what Michigan State needed right now. You bring in Childs, who is the kind of looks like the star of the future. And I think he'll be the starter in 2024, but Schuster provides at least somebody who can push him in spring practice and maybe even to fall camp as well. Schuster's a guy who is a 4-year starter at the FCS level, has thrown for over 9,000 yards, just a ton of experience. And I think that's exactly what Jonathan Smith needed to add to this quarterback room, given the fact that all three quarterbacks from last year transferred out. It's a brand new quarterback room. I just thought it was a really good fit. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a good fit as well. I know he also is from Michigan, so I think his Michigan ties maybe could help that a little bit. Maybe I think he was getting interest to kind of be a potential starter at some group of 5 schools, but he opted for MSU, where it's not a given that he's going to be the starter. So I think that's definitely helpful for them with just the depth, because like we talked about, the fact that they totally clean house in that QB room, and they got to get 3 to 4 new guys, and the fact that they got two guys out of high school, and Childs, who is going to be a true sophomore next year. So You have a really young room. I think, yeah, like that, like you said, adding that veteran presence is huge for them. Because if God forbid Childs goes down, but if he did, you'd be throwing, two guys who just, flipped from group of 5 schools, to MSU into, potentially a Big Ten game, or, they play Boston College early. So yeah, like that's tough. So the fact that they got someone with experience who can be calm, who can be confident, who knows how to lead a team, because North Dakota was pretty successful and they were in the toughest league in the FCS. So that's definitely some good experience to get. I can talk about a little bit about like some of the high school guys.
Yeah.
So they did add Alicio Milivojevich, I think is how you say his name. Out of Illinois.
Milivojevic, maybe.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah. So he flipped from Ball State, and he really was a riser. I think a lot of people from all the recruiting sites, kind of saw his potential in the summer at some of the camps that he went to, and really just showed off his arm and kind of, his mind as well, and making the right reads and making the right throws. And he kind of put that, in place this season, because he went to St. Francis High School, outside of Chicago. So he really did well, and got some recognition to be a Big Ten quarterback, and that's huge for him, because like I said, he was committed to Ball State. So yeah, I think that's a good pickup for them, especially kind of in the short time span that they had. Obviously, with Henry Hasselback decommitting, and then they add another guy on National Signing Day. They add Rylan Jesse out of California, who he didn't really post anything on social media, so it was hard to follow. But he did take an official visit, and he did commit to MSU on National Signing Day and already signed. And both of them are also early enrollees, so they're already on campus, working out with the team. So I think that's another thing to look at. That's a big factor, is now to start of December, you really had only one guy kind of coming, and now you have 4 guys already on campus. So I think that just shows kind of just this day and age of college football, how, you even look at a team like Alabama right now, where they're losing a ton of guys, but within a month, it's going to be a quick turnaround. You're going to have, a completely different roster. And, we can talk about this later, but I do think, they did a lot of other good things in the transfer portal and the high school, recruiting as well, outside of quarterback.
No, I agree. I know Ryland was a guy who the current Michigan State staff, when they were at Oregon State, had kind of identified him as a guy that they were just keeping an eye on for Oregon State. So that obviously helped when you kind of come down the stretch. He's committed to Utah State, but Jonathan Smith and the staff kind of get on the phone and say, hey, like, you want to come play Big Ten football? Like, so good to, again, at that point, you just needed some bodies. I like the fact that you brought up that both those guys are early enrollees. Get them on campus, give them as much of a runway as you can. Obviously, if Michigan State gets into a situation where one of those 2 guys has to take meaningful snaps, they're probably in trouble. Like, that's not a knock on those guys. It's just the reality of the situation. And it'll be interesting to see like how those 2 guys, their career plays out, because we know what the transfer portal is like each offseason. We know that Childs is expected to be here for at minimum the next 2 years, maybe the next 3. But again, got to get some guys in the room, start coaching those guys up. Jonathan Smith and the coaching staff has kind of made a name for taking guys who were undervalued and elevating them. Now, granted, Childs was a big-time recruit, and DJ Uyungale was a big-time recruit that they got to come over from Clemson. But at other areas, the staff has done a good job of taking those 3-star guys and elevating them. So, and that'll be a key here. So, with that, I think we covered the quarterbacks pretty well. Let's get into some of the transfer stuff. And we might as well start with the most recent news, and that was today with Zion Young choosing to commit to Missouri out of the transfer portal. Michigan State has had, roughly 20 guys enter the portal who are still in the portal right now, or have from last year's roster, I should say, who entered the portal this offseason. Some of those guys, or a lot of those guys, Smith and the coaching staff has managed to bring back to East Lansing for next season. If you throw those guys in there, it's right around 26, 27 guys. These are about eight or nine guys who have withdrawn their names and are coming back. I know Zion was a guy who the staff definitely wanted to keep. They threw some resources at. They were trying to recruit him to come back. Doesn't work out. Big loss in my opinion. Starting defensive end, a guy who was kind of thrust into things right away as a freshman. Played in 8 games, made a couple of starts with the injuries and suspensions that happened that year, and then last year was a starter and one of the young promising defensive linemen for Michigan State. So a tough loss. Your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think that's a tough loss. Yeah, just like you said, the fact that he's a starter, the fact that he has experience, and he kind of learned it on the fly.
Yeah.
Like you said, they just kind of threw him in there, and he stuck. He did well. I know, that whole unit kind of struggled on and off pretty much the last 2 seasons, and that's been kind of a focal point for MSU the last decade, and then they kind of lost it within the last 2 or 3 years. And there's a lot of good, talented pieces, and he was one of them. But just as a whole unit, they couldn't get it done. But the fact, he left, but they also added Quindarius Dunigan, who's transferred from Middle Tennessee, and I think one of their biggest wins in the transfer portal, like you mentioned, was one of the guys they kept, which was Derek Harmon. I think that's huge for them, because he was getting interest from a lot of big schools like Ohio State and Oregon,
Auburn,
and Auburn. And the fact that he stayed, that might be their biggest recruiting win far, because he's really important to that defense. And so you're going to see a whole different defense. And, with Joe Rossi's defense, the new defensive coordinator coming over from Minnesota, it's going to look a lot different than, what Scotty Hazelton ran in terms of scheme. So kind of seeing where he fits in with that, maybe Zion Young felt that he was, fit in a better scheme than what Rossi did. I don't know what those conversations were like, but
sure.
I can imagine that had to be part of it. So yeah, just figuring that out. So I think they'll be all right though. Just with kind of the guys they've added from the portal, because they also did add Daquan Deuce, who's from Georgia Tech, who, he's an ACC player. He played at a high level. He did pretty well. I think he had almost 70 tackles this season as an interior lineman. So that's pretty good. So I think I think they'll be all right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I heard a collective cheer from the Michigan State fan base when you said that Joe Rossi is going to have a much different schematical going forward than Scotty Hazelton. I heard the cheer even way over here in Kalamazoo area, but and it's obviously one of the things I think the fan base is most looking forward to is like, what can a new offensive philosophy, maybe just an identity. I think you wrote something fairly recently about, maybe Michigan State can finally have an identity on offense going into 2024 with Jonathan Smith and Brian Lindgren and those guys, putting their heads together and doing a lot of the same stuff that they did at Oregon State. But then defensively, a guy who Jonathan Smith has not worked with previously, but ran a good system over there at Minnesota. I mean, the defense at Minnesota has kind of carried that program over the last couple of years. Since Tanner Morgan, the quarterback, went down a couple of years ago with an injury, and PJ Fleck's system or program hasn't quite been the same without Tanner Morgan as then with him. And Joe Rossi is a big reason of why they've able to put some wins together over there. So looking forward to seeing what he brings to Michigan State next fall. As far as some other transfer things that happen, obviously the thing with Tony Grimes, I don't really want to touch on a whole lot just because he was here for like an hour and is gone. That's going to happen in this modern era. For those of you who don't know, is a former 5-star corner who was at North Carolina, transferred to Texas A&M, got hurt, didn't play last year, was briefly committed to Michigan State, but now is headed to UNLV. There were some admissions problems with his transcripts coming over to Michigan State and some other things. So that's about all you need to know about that. We should probably talk about we don't have to spend a ton of time here, but I feel like the need to talk about Malik Carr a little bit, just because he's a guy who we talked about quite a bit over the last year. And then he had that tweet that went out that got deleted about the current Michigan State staff not wanting him, and that's why he was no longer a Spartan. I guess your reaction to just that, Aiden, and him, where he ended up at Houston, I think. And we can kind of we'll put a bow on the Malik Carr saga at Michigan State. Called me out on Twitter during the offseason for not being a good blocker, or at least that's what I said. Didn't like that, but let's. I think this will be the last time we ever talk about Malik Carr. So let's tie a bow on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really much you can say. That I think part of whether it was true or not about not wanting him. I think Brian Wozniak, the new tight ends coach from Oregon State, they're bringing in Jack Belling.
Yeah, talk about big
from Oregon State, who was an all Pac-12 tight end who
right.
Probably if Malik Carr would have stayed, I don't think he would have been winning the job over him. So no. I think that's kind of where it's coming from. I don't think it's in bad blood or anything,
sure.
But it's just in his best interest. He probably wouldn't play at MSU if he stayed. So, but I think he'll find a level at Houston. I think that's still the Big 12, which is high level football, and I think that maybe a new change of scenery will help him in a lot of ways. So yeah, I guess that's the end to that saga for me.
Yeah, no, and it's definitely, I think anybody who's reasonable can look at the addition of Velling, the departure of Carr, and see that as a net positive for Michigan State. And we're not here to like trash the guy or anything like that, but it's just that to your point, Velling was an all Pac-12 level tight end, a guy who already knows the system that Smith and the coaching staff wants to implement, is going to be maybe a natural security blanket type for Aiden Childs, a guy to check the ball down to, a guy that he's going to look to and target a lot. So I can't believe we didn't think about Jack. I didn't think about Jack Velling until we started talking about Malik Carr. But yeah, that's a net positive for Michigan State, and one of those big additions that should have the fan base excited to see how that plays out next year. Well, Aiden, we're approaching 45 minutes. I don't have anything else written down, but it has been a month. So is there any other topics that you want to dig into? Because there's probably plenty that we can talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we can talk about a little bit quickly, we can just talk about the linebacker room. I think the linebackers and the offensive line, I think those are
fair.
Two positions from the transfer portal that really MSU needed desperately, and they got out of that. I think you have Jordan Hall right there, and he's kind of the centerpiece that you can build around. And in Joe Rossi's new defense, you're going to need a lot. There's going to be a lot of kind of different packages for players. So adding Jordan Turner from the linebacker from Wisconsin, adding Wayne Matthews who from Old Dominion, who had over 130 tackles last season. I think that's huge that you can have those guys, and you don't need to expect a lot from them. You don't have to expect, 100+ tackles from those two guys this year, but the fact that they, could fit, in some of those places and those roles that Rossi wants to run, because it is a defense that can move around, that, can adjust to a 3 front or a 4 front and kind of, throw the offense off. A lot of people talk about how difficult, offenses are these days, but kind of what Rossi's done to be successful is kind of, change it up on defense to throw offenses off. So I think that's a big thing. And then offensive line, I talked about Derek Harmon being probably their biggest win in the transfer portal, but also adding, bringing Gino Vandermark back, bringing Ethan Boyd back. I think that's huge. And then you go and add Tanner Miller. And like you talked about with Jack Velling, it's the same thing. It's the comfort level with some of these Oregon State coaches and players coming in. So adding him, I think that's huge, because you do lose, Nick Samac, and you do lose JD Duplain, who were your two kind of centerpieces. And then, Spencer Brown also left. So bringing in some more veteran guys, I think that's huge for them on both sides. I think for Jonathan Smith to be successful at Michigan State, I think, recruiting wise, I don't think we can expect those top 25 classes that we saw with, Mel Tucker. And I don't think they're expecting that either, to get those high level guys. But I think where they're really going to make their money if they are successful is, develop and recruit high school recruits who are, 3 stars and maybe some low 4 stars. But, those transfer guys are going to be huge. I think finding those guys like they found, bringing in DJ Uiagalelei at Oregon State, adding, Jack Velling is huge. Childs is huge. Bringing guys from the outside like Matthews and Turner, that's big. So I think that's really where they're going to have a lot of success, is identifying that transfer talent.
Yeah, the offensive line situation there for a while was scary, because to your point, Samac's gone, Duplain's gone, and I know the offensive line hasn't been great over the last 3 years, and so like the initial attitude might be, well, those guys were not good anyway, so why? You just don't like bring in a new, like ask Colorado how bringing in a brand new offensive line works. That they almost got Shadur Sanders killed this year, so it takes time to build an offensive line. I think at one point, Michigan State had 6 or 7 guys from last year enter the transfer portal. And I was just thinking, man, like this, there's no depth here. Fortunately, I think Michigan State got 4 or 5 of those guys back from the portal. You mentioned them earlier, so I won't recant that here. But like that's a big deal. You get a new voice in the room with Jim McCalzick. I think that's the O-line coach. A new voice. We were mostly complimentary of Chris Kapilovic while he was here, but improvement just didn't come, and maybe a new voice in the room can help springboard that a little bit. I don't think Michigan State's going to immediately become an outstanding offensive line next season, but if you can get back to just a Big Ten average level, that's gonna go a long way towards making this year one a success, which we've agreed would be, get to a bowl game and start to establish those roots again in the Midwest with these, West Coast coaches that are coming over. Like that's a successful year one. If you can get back to being, again, at a Big Ten average as far as the offensive line, that'll go a long way towards reaching that point. We haven't looked ahead of the schedule too much, just because we have 8 months before football's back. Maybe not quite 8, but pretty close. And so we haven't looked too closely at the schedule, but like when I do look at the schedule and I factor in the fact that it's the new Big Ten, you add those 4 West Coast teams, the schedule, there's certainly that middle stretch I think is really daunting. But the beginning of the year and the end of the year, there's some winnable games in there. So if you can establish that identity on offense that Smith likes with the smash mouth style, you have a dual threat quarterback in Childs, and then some pieces on defense. Like it's got to come together. But I do like some of the individual pieces on defense, and so we'll see how that all shapes together. All right, Aiden. I think we've done a pretty good job of recapping this last month that we missed.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or topics before we get out of here?
No, I mean, I think, now that the holidays are over, I think we'll be on a more consistent basis. So we'll be able to cover that stuff kind of as it comes. Whatever we've missed, I'm sure we'll cover it within the next couple of weeks if we forgot. So
for those of you who are watching, again, we're going to try to have a pod at least once a week. Seeing how it's Monday, maybe if something major happens later in the week, maybe we'll jump on again this week. But if not, we'll see y'all guys next week. And thank you for joining us on the Spartan Nation Podcast. Appreciate it. As always, make sure you ask those questions. We need more questions next time we come live. Then we have more stuff to talk about. So next time we're on, ask some more questions. But yeah, we'll see you guys next time.